Admiral Taeho Kim stood in the center of the massive Galactic Council chamber. The room was huge, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some looked like giant insects. Others had blue skin and 3 eyes. A few looked like walking trees, with silver bark. All of them were staring at him with what he could only describe as pity. The holographic display behind him showed Earth's defense systems. Nuclear missiles sat in silos across the planet. Orbital platforms floated around Earth, like metal rings. Space stations with railguns pointed toward the dark between stars. To Taeho they looked impressive. To everyone else in the room they looked like toys. This is what humans call a defense grid? The voice came from General Kethmore of the Vexthari Empire. He was tall and covered in red scales with 4 arms that moved when he talked. My children play with more dangerous weapons. Laughter filled the chamber. The insect-like beings of the Hive Collective made clicking sounds that Taeho had learned. Meant they found something funny. The tree people of the Botanical Union rustled their leaves in what passed for their version of giggling. Taeho kept his face calm. He had been a soldier for 30 years. He had learned not to show anger when others mocked him. But inside his jaw was tight. The humans still use chemical explosives, said another voice. This came from Speaker Velnara of the Etherian Republic. She looked almost human, except for her silver eyes and the way her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Our smallest patrol ships carry weapons that could destroy their largest cities. More laughter. Taeho watched as the beings around him pointed at the display. They were looking at humanity's best weapons like they were looking at cave paintings. Dr. Hai-Jin Park stepped forward. She was Earth's best scientist when it came to studying alien life. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the blue uniform of the Earth Science Corps. Honorable Council members, she said, her voice clear and strong. Humans may be new to the galaxy, but we have unique ways of thinking. Our evolution on Earth gave us abilities that might surprise you. The clicking from the Hive Collective got louder. Their representative, a being that looked like a giant praying mantis, tilted its triangular head. What abilities could a species have when they cannot even leave their own star system without chemical rockets? Heejin opened her mouth to answer, but General Kethmore cut her off. Save your breath, human. Your species is barely out of the caves. You have no plasma weapons, no antimatter drives, no reality shapers. You fight with metal slugs and fire. How did you even get permission to speak here? The question stung because Taeho knew the answer. Earth had been invited to the Galactic Council only because they had been discovered by accident. A trade ship had stumbled into the solar system while running from pirates. The captain had been amazed to find intelligent life on a backwater planet. But the Council had rules. Any species that could build cities and send signals into space had to be invited to join. It did not matter if they were weak. It did not matter. If their weapons were simple, the law was the law. That did not mean anyone had to take them seriously. Perhaps, said Speaker Velnara, we should assign Earth the lowest defense rating, Class 5. That way they will not be expected to help in any real conflicts. Class 5 was the rating given to worlds that were basically defenseless. It meant that if enemies came, Earth would be on its own until the stronger races could spare some ships to help. It was better than being kicked out of the Council, but not by much. Taeho felt his hands clench behind his back. We may not have your advanced weapons, he said, keeping his voice steady. But humans have something else. We do not give up, ever. This brought the biggest laugh yet. General Kethmore slapped his scaled knee with one of his 4 hands. Brave. Words from someone whose species would be wiped out by a single battlecruiser. Courage means nothing when your enemy can crack your planet from orbit. Far away from the Council chamber, on the frozen continent of Antarctica, Dr. Min-Soo Lee was staring at a computer screen. He worked at Research Outpost Sejong, a small base built on the ice. His job was to watch for earthquakes and study the ice sheets. It was quiet work, but he liked it. Today the quiet was broken. The seismic sensors were going crazy. The screen showed lines jumping up and down like the heartbeat of someone running a race. But there had been no earthquake. At least not the kind that happened when the Earth's plates moved against each other. Min-Soo frowned and checked the readings again. The vibrations were coming from deep underground, very deep. The sensors said the source was almost 2 miles below the ice. He called his assistant, a young woman named Sujin. "Come look at this," he said. "Have you ever seen readings like these?" Sujin looked at the screen and shook her head. "It looks like something big is moving down there, but that's impossible. The ice has been solid for millions of years." Minsu saved the data and sent it to the main research center. Someone with more experience would need to look at this. The patterns were too strange, too regular. They looked almost like they were made by something intelligent. Back in the council chamber, the meeting was ending. Earth had been given its Class 5 rating. Taeho and Heijin would return home with the news that their planet was considered the weakest member of the galactic community. As they walked toward their small transport ship, Heijin spoke quietly. "They think they know everything about us. They think they understand what humans can do." Taeho nodded. "Let them think that. Maybe it's better if they underestimate us." Neither of them knew that at that moment Captain So Young Choi was receiving a priority message at Earth Defense Command. The message had come from the deep space monitoring stations that watch the edges of the solar system. So Young read the message twice before she believed it. Then she ran to the command center. "Sir," she said to Admiral Taeho's second-in-command, "we have a problem, a big problem." The message was simple but terrifying. Long-range sensors had detected ships approaching from deep space. Lots of ships. The computer estimated more than 1,000 vessels all moving toward Earth. The ships belonged to something called the Void Reapers. According to the Galactic database, the Void Reapers were machines that destroyed everything in their path. They had wiped out entire star systems. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted. They just appeared, destroyed everything alive, and moved on. The estimated time until they reached Earth was 6 months. So Young looked at the data again. Earth's primitive defenses would have to face an enemy that had destroyed civilizations, far more advanced than humanity. The aliens who had laughed at Earth's weapons were about to see if courage really meant nothing against overwhelming power. In Antarctica, the seismic readings were getting stronger. Dr. Minsu Lee worked through the night trying to understand what was happening beneath the ice. He did not know that the vibrations were connected to the approaching threat. He did not know that something ancient was beginning to wake up, something that had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The galaxy had laughed at Earth's defenses. Soon, they would learn why that had been a mistake. The news of the approaching Void Reapers spread across Earth like wildfire. In the 6 months since the Galactic Council had laughed at humanity's defenses, everything had changed. Now those same defenses were all that stood between Earth and complete destruction. Commander Dongwu Zhang had not slept properly in weeks. He stood on the observation deck of Orbital Platform 7, watching construction crews work around the clock. Sparks flew as welders sealed new armor plates to the station's hull. Massive cranes moved fresh weapons into position. Every few minutes, supply ships arrived with more materials. "How many more platforms can we build?" he asked his chief engineer. Engineer Na Young Song looked up from her tablet. Her face was tired, but her eyes were still sharp. "At this rate, maybe 3 more, but they won't be as strong as the ones we already have. We're running out of the good materials." Dongwu nodded. He had expected this answer. Earth's industries were working at full capacity, but they were still just one planet. The aliens had thousands of worlds to draw resources from. Humanity had to make do with what they could mine from their own system. "What about the new weapons?" he asked. Na Young's expression grew slightly more hopeful. "The railguns are 30% more powerful than the old ones. The missile systems can track faster targets, and we've managed to reverse engineer some basic energy shields from the alien technology the Council gave us." The alien technology was not much. When Earth had begged for help, the Council had sent a few outdated weapon designs and some basic shield generators. It was like giving a Stone Age tribe a broken radio and expecting them to build a space program. But humans were good at making do with what they had. Na Young and her teams had torn apart every piece of alien tech they could get their hands on. They had learned how to copy the energy patterns, even if they did not understand the science behind them. The result was weapons that were still far behind what the advanced races used, but they were better than anything Earth had possessed before. Down, on the planet's surface, Captain So-Young Choi was training the crews that would fly Earth's defense fleet. The ships were small compared to alien vessels, but they were fast and hard to hit. The plan was to use speed and numbers to make up for lack of firepower. "Remember," she told the pilots gathered in the briefing room, "we can't match their weapons, but we can outfly them. Hit and run. Never stay in one place long enough for them to lock onto you." One of the younger pilots raised his hand. "Captain, what if our weapons can't hurt them at all?" So-Young had been asking herself the same question. The reports about the Void Reapers were terrifying. They used machines that could repair themselves. Their hulls were made from materials that absorbed energy weapons. Some ships had been seen changing shape in the middle of battle. "Then we find another way," she said simply. "Humans have always been good at finding another way." Meanwhile, in Antarctica, Dr. Min-Soo Lee was making discoveries that would have amazed the scientific world if anyone had time to pay attention. The seismic activity had not stopped. In fact, it was getting stronger every day. His team had drilled down through the ice to investigate the source of the vibrations. What they found defied explanation. 2 miles below the surface, their drills had hit something that was not rock or ice. It was smooth, hard, and gave off a faint blue glow. "It's some kind of metal," said Sujin, studying the samples they had brought up. "But it's not like any metal I've ever seen. It's perfectly smooth even at the molecular level, and it's warm." Min-Soo examined the sample under a microscope. The material seemed to pulse with its own internal light. Sometimes the pulsing would speed up as if responding to something. "We need to go deeper," he said. "We need to see what this is." They brought in larger drilling equipment. Working in the brutal Antarctic cold, they carved a shaft down through the ice. The blue glow got brighter as they went deeper. Then, at exactly 2 miles down, their drill broke through into empty space. Min-Soo was the first person to descend into the chamber they had discovered. He rappelled down on a rope, his helmet light cutting through the darkness. What he saw took his breath away. The chamber was huge, easily the size of a football stadium. The walls were made of the same blue glowing material they had found above. But this was not just a cave. The walls were covered in patterns that were clearly artificial. Geometric shapes flowed across the surfaces like frozen lightning, and in the center of the chamber stood structures that could only be described as machines. They were tall and elegant, made of materials that seemed to shift and flow even as he watched. They hummed with a low, deep sound that he felt in his bones. "Sujin," he whispered into his radio. "You need to see this." Dr. Hyojin Park arrived at the Antarctic site 3 days later. As Earth's leading expert on alien life, she had been called in to study the discoveries. What she found challenged everything she knew about Earth's history. The materials in the chamber were clearly artificial, but they were ancient. Dating tests suggested they were millions of years old. More importantly, when she ran genetic analysis on trace organic compounds found in the blue metal, she made a discovery that left her speechless. The organic material contained DNA sequences, not complete genes, but fragments that matched human DNA patterns. It was as if whoever had built this place was related to humanity, but from so far in the past that evolution had changed both species beyond recognition. "This is impossible," she told Min-Soo as they stood in the chamber. "These structures predate human civilization by millions of years, but the genetic markers suggest a connection to our species." The machines in the chamber had grown more active since humans had entered. The humming had gotten louder, and new lights had begun blinking on panels that covered the strange devices. It was as if the ancient technology was waking up after a long sleep. Back in space, the Galactic Council was holding emergency sessions. The approaching Void Reapers were not just Earth's problem. The machine fleet was large enough to threaten the entire sector. Admiral Tae-ho Kim requested help from the Council. He stood once again before the assembled aliens, but this time no one was laughing. The Void Reapers were a threat that even the advanced races took seriously. "We are willing to help," said General Kethmore, "but Earth's defenses are too weak to make a difference." We suggest you evacuate your population to our worlds. We can offer refugee status to perhaps 10% of your people. The offer was meant to be generous, but Taeho felt sick hearing it. 10% meant that 9 out of every 10 humans would be left behind to die. What if we refuse to evacuate? He asked. Speaker Velnara answered. Then you will face the Void Reapers alone. We cannot risk our fleets defending a world that cannot defend itself. The loss would be too great. Taeho transmitted the Council's offer to Earth. The response from the government was immediate and unanimous. Humanity would not abandon its homeworld. They would fight with whatever they had, even if it meant facing impossible odds. The decision surprised no one who knew humans. Throughout their history, they had always chosen to fight rather than run. Sometimes this stubbornness led to disaster. Sometimes it led to miraculous victories. This time, they would find out which it would be. As the weeks passed, the Void Reaper fleet got closer. Long-range scans showed that the enemy ships were even larger than the estimates. Some of them were the size of small moons. Their hulls were covered in weapons that could probably destroy Earth's entire defense grid with a single shot. But in Antarctica, something was changing. The ancient machines were becoming more active every day. Dr. Min-Soo Lee's team had discovered that the chamber they had found was just the beginning. Ground-penetrating radar showed a vast complex stretching for miles under the ice. Hundreds of chambers, all filled with the same strange technology, and all of it was waking up. Hyejin Park spent her days studying the alien symbols carved into the walls. They were beginning to make sense to her, as if her brain was learning to read a language it had always known but forgotten. The symbols spoke of guardians and watchers, of ancient responsibilities and sleeping powers. Most importantly, they spoke of a test, something about proving worthiness in the face of extinction. The Void Reapers were only 2 months away when the first structure emerged from the Antarctic ice. It rose slowly, like a mountain being born. The blue glow that had been hidden underground now lit up the southern sky like an aurora. Satellite images showed the structure clearly. It was a tower, perfectly smooth and impossibly tall. It reached up into the atmosphere, defying everything humans knew about engineering and physics, and it was just the beginning. The Void Reapers arrived on a Tuesday morning Earth time. Their ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, like black stars against the void. Captain So-Young Choi watched from the bridge of the EDS Defiance as her sensors tried to count the enemy vessels. "How many?" she asked her weapons officer. "Computer says over 1,500 ships, Captain. Some of them are..." He paused, checking his readings again. "Some of them are 50 kilometers long." So-Young had seen the reports, but seeing the actual numbers made her stomach drop. Earth's entire defense fleet consisted of 200 ships, and the largest was barely 3 kilometers from nose to tail. They were about to fight an enemy that outnumbered them 7-1, with ships that dwarfed their own. The first attack came without warning. Mars's orbital defenses simply vanished in flashes of white light. The research colonies on the red planet went dark one by one, as beams of energy carved through their protective domes. In less than an hour, humanity lost its first foothold in space. Admiral Taeho Kim watched the destruction from Earth's command center. The alien ships moved like nothing he had ever seen. They did not fly in formation like human vessels. Instead, they flowed through space like schools of metal fish, changing direction without slowing down, turning impossible corners that should have torn them apart. "All fleet commanders, prepare for defense pattern Alpha," he ordered into his communicator. "Remember, our job is to buy time for the evacuation ships." But even as he spoke, Taeho knew that evacuation was hopeless. The Void Reapers had surrounded the entire solar system. Nothing was getting out. The enemy fleet reached Earth's outer defenses in 6 hours. The orbital platforms that Commander Dongwu Jang had worked so hard to build opened fire as soon as the alien ships came into range. Railgun slugs and missiles streaked through space, followed by the bright beams of the energy weapons that engineer Na Young-song had built from reverse-engineered alien technology. For a moment, it looked like Earth's weapons might actually work. Several of the smaller Void Reaper ships staggered under the bombardment, One of them even exploded in a ball of blue fire. Then the enemy returned fire. The alien weapons were unlike anything in human experience. They did not fire projectiles or energy beams. Instead, they seemed to reach out with invisible hands and simply crush whatever they touched. Orbital Platform 3 folded in on itself like a crumpled paper ball. Platform 9 split in half so cleanly that the two pieces drifted apart without any debris. "All platforms, evasive maneuvers," Dongwu shouted. But his words were useless. The platforms were too big to dodge, and the alien weapons moved faster than thought. Within 2 hours, half of Earth's orbital defenses were gone. Captain So Young. Choi led her squadron in a desperate attack on one of the smaller enemy ships. Her pilots followed her in, firing everything they had at the alien vessel's hull. The missiles struck home, but where they should have torn holes in the metal, the ship's surface simply rippled like water and returned to its original shape. "It's repairing itself," her wingman shouted over the radio. "The hull is healing faster than we can damage it." So Young watched in horror as the alien ship turned toward her fighters. She could see weapons emerging from its surface like thorns, growing from a plant. "All fighters break off. Scatter pattern Gamma." Half her squadron made it clear before the alien weapons fired. The other half simply ceased to exist. Their ships disintegrated so completely that not even debris remained. But, while the battle raged in space, something extraordinary was happening on Earth's surface. In Antarctica, Dr. Min-Soo Lee stood in the control chamber of the ancient complex, his hands pressed against panels that pulsed with blue light. The alien symbols on the walls were moving now, flowing like liquid across the surfaces. The complex was responding to the electromagnetic signatures of the battle above. With each explosion, each weapon discharge, the ancient machines hummed louder. It was as if they were feeding on the energy of conflict, growing stronger with every passing moment. "Min-Soo, you need to see this," Sujin called from across the chamber. She was standing before a wall covered in what looked like a star map. Points of light showed the positions of every ship in the solar system, both human and alien. "The complex is tracking the battle. It knows what's happening up there." Dr. Hyjin Park was working frantically to decode the symbols that covered every surface. Her understanding of the alien language had grown rapidly since entering the complex, as if the knowledge was downloading directly into her brain. The Yao symbols told an incredible story. Millions of years ago, an ancient race had seeded the galaxy with life. They had visited thousands of worlds, leaving behind the basic building blocks that would eventually evolve into intelligent species. Earth had been their final stop, their sanctuary, the place where they had hidden their greatest treasures. The complex beneath Antarctica was not just a building. It was a guardian system, designed to protect Earth when its children faced extinction. But it would only activate when humanity proved itself worthy, when they chose to fight rather than surrender in the face of impossible odds. "The symbols are changing," Hyjin whispered. "They're responding to what's happening in the battle. The system it's evaluating us." Above them, the battle was going badly for humanity. Admiral Tae-ho Kim had lost contact with half his fleet. The orbital platforms were falling one by one, their crews dying at their posts rather than abandoning their positions. It looked like the end of everything. But in the depths of the Antarctic complex, ancient mechanisms were reaching a decision. The first sign that something had changed came from the seismic sensors. Earthquakes began rippling out from Antarctica, but these were not natural tremors. They moved in perfect patterns, spreading across the globe like ripples on a pond. In cities around the world, people felt the ground pulse beneath their feet, with a rhythm like a massive heartbeat. Then the ice began to move. Satellite cameras captured the moment when the first structure broke through the surface. It rose from the Antarctic ice sheet like a mountain being born, but its shape was clearly artificial. Smooth blue surfaces stretched up into the sky, covered in the same geometric patterns that Dr. Min-Soo Lee had found in the underground chambers. But this was just the beginning. All across Antarctica, the ice cracked and shifted as more structures emerged. Towers, pyramids, and shapes that had no names in human language pushed their way to the surface. Each one glowed with the same blue light, and all of them hummed, with power that made the air itself vibrate. In the command center of the ancient complex, Minsu felt the change in his bones. The panels under his hands were no longer just warm. They were hot with energy that seemed to flow directly into his nervous system. He could feel the vast machine network coming online, could sense weapons charging that made Earth's nuclear arsenal look like firecrackers. "Hiya, Jin," he called, his voice strange even to his own ears. "The system wants to talk to us. It's trying to make contact." The symbols on the walls were moving faster now, forming new patterns that hurt to look at directly. But Hyajin found she could understand them anyway. The ancient race had built this system not just to protect Earth, but to test its inhabitants. The Void Reapers were not the first extinction-level threat the galaxy had faced. They were just the latest. The Guardian system had waited through millions of years for humanity to reach this moment. Not the moment when they faced destruction, but the moment when they chose to face it rather than run from it. The choice to fight for their home rather than abandon it was the key that unlocked Earth's true inheritance. In space above, the battle had reached its darkest point. Captain So Young Choi's ship was one of the few fighters still operational, and she was running out of ammunition. The Void Reapers had broken through the outer defenses and were approaching Earth itself. Their largest ships were already targeting population centers. Then something impossible happened. Beams of coherent energy, brighter than the sun, lanced up from Earth's surface. They moved with precision that no human targeting system could match, striking Void Reaper ships that were thousands of kilometers away. Where the beams touched the alien vessels, metal simply ceased to exist. Not melted or vaporized, but deleted from reality, as if it had never been there. The largest Void Reaper ship, the one that had been preparing to fire on New York City, found itself cut in half by a beam that appeared from nowhere. The two halves drifted apart in space, their edges perfectly smooth where the ancient weapon had carved through them. What the hell was that? So, Young whispered, staring at her sensor readings. On Earth's surface, the Antarctic complex was fully awakening. Towers of blue light stretched up into the atmosphere, their tops disappearing into the ionosphere. Energy patterns flowed between them like lightning made solid, creating a web of power that covered the entire continent. Dr. Minsu Lee found himself at the center of it all, his consciousness somehow connected to the ancient network. He could feel the Guardian system's vast intelligence examining him, judging not just his worthiness but the worthiness of his entire species. The test was not about strength or technology. The Guardian weapons fired again, and 3 more Void Reaper ships simply vanished. Not destroyed or damaged, they ceased to exist, as if they had been erased from the universe itself. Captain So Young Choi watched her sensors in amazement as the readings showed empty space where massive alien vessels had been just moments before. "All human ships fall back to safe distance," came Admiral Tae-ho Kim's voice over the communication system. "Unknown weapons are engaging the enemy. Do not interfere." So Young pulled her fighter back, but she could not stop staring at what was happening. The beams of light that rose from Earth's surface were unlike anything in human science. They seemed to bend space around them, creating ripples in reality that her instruments could barely detect. The Void Reapers were trying to adapt, but their usual tactics were useless. Their ships could repair damage, but these weapons did not cause damage, in any normal sense. Where the beams touched, matter simply stopped existing. There was nothing to repair because there was nothing left. Admiral Tae-ho Kim stood in Earth's command center, watching displays that showed impossible things. The energy readings from Antarctica were off the scale. Whatever was happening down there was using more power than Earth's entire electrical grid, but the source of that power was not showing up on any of their sensors. "Sir," his communications officer called, "we're getting reports from around the globe. Similar structures are emerging from underground in 12 different locations. The Sahara Desert, the Amazon Basin, the Pacific Ocean floor. They're everywhere." On his main screen, satellite images showed towering structures rising from hidden chambers all over Earth. Each one was different in shape but made from the same blue glowing material. They all hummed with the same impossible energy, and from each one beams of coherent force reached out to strike the alien fleet. In Antarctica, Dr. Min-Soo Lee was no longer entirely human. The ancient systems had formed a connection with his nervous system, allowing him to interface directly with technology that was millions of years old. Through this connection, he could see the battle as the Guardian Network saw it, not just as ships and weapons, but as patterns of energy and intention. The Void Reapers were not alive in any way humans understood life, but they were not simply machines either. They were something between the two, artificial minds housed in bodies of living metal. Their thought patterns were visible to the Guardian sensors as dark threads weaving through space. "They're trying to retreat," Min-Soo said, his voice echoing strangely in the chamber. "But the network won't let them." Dr. Hyojin Park was still working to understand the symbols that flowed across the walls, but now she was reading them as fast as they appeared. The ancient language was becoming as natural to her as Korean. The story it told was incredible. The race that had built the Guardian system had faced the Void Reapers before, millions of years ago. They had learned that the machine intelligence could not be reasoned with or defeated by conventional means. It consumed everything it touched, growing stronger with each world it destroyed. So the ancients had created a trap. They had seeded the galaxy with life, knowing that eventually the Void Reapers would return. When they did, they would be drawn to the most vibrant world, Earth. And there, the Guardians would be waiting. But the trap could only be sprung by Earth's children. The ancients had built their weapons to respond only to beings who chose courage over survival, who would fight for others rather than themselves. Humanity had passed that test by refusing to abandon their homeworld. Commander Dongwu Jang watched from what remained of Orbital Platform 7 as the Guardian weapons systematically destroyed the Void Reaper fleet. The alien ships that had seemed unstoppable were now fleeing in all directions, but the ancient beams followed them wherever they went. "It's like watching gods fight," his communications officer whispered. Engineer Na Young Song was frantically trying to scan the Guardian structures with every instrument she had. The energy signatures made no sense according to human physics. The weapons seemed to be manipulating fundamental forces that her people had not even discovered yet. "The power source isn't nuclear or fusion," she reported to Dongwu. "It's not drawing energy from anywhere we can detect. It's like the weapons are creating power from nothing." What Na Young did not understand was that the Guardian weapons were not creating energy. They were borrowing it from the universe itself. They reached into the quantum foam that existed between atoms and extracted the infinite potential energy that lurked there. It was technology so advanced that it might as well have been magic. The Void Reapers were learning this lesson the hard way. Their adaptive systems had been designed to counter any weapon technology they encountered, but the Guardian beams operated on principles that their creators had never imagined. They tried to modify their hulls to absorb the energy, but there was no energy to absorb. They tried to generate shields, but the beams passed through them as if they did not exist. In desperation, the machine intelligence commanding the fleet tried something it had never done before. It attempted to communicate. The message reached Earth's communication systems as a burst of mathematical symbols. It took the computers several minutes to decode it, but when they did, the meaning was clear. "We offer terms for withdrawal." Admiral Tae-ho Kim looked at the message in amazement. In all the records of Void Reaper attacks, they had never tried to negotiate. They simply appeared, destroyed everything, and moved on. For them to offer terms meant they were truly desperate, but the response did not come from Earth's government. It came from the Guardian network itself, transmitted through the ancient symbols that covered the walls of the Antarctic complex. Dr. Hyojin Park translated it for the command staff. "You have consumed your last world. Your reign of destruction ends here." The Guardian weapons fired again, and the largest remaining Void Reaper ship, a massive construct the size of a small moon, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, its dark hull bristling with weapons. The next moment there was only empty space and the light of distant stars. The surviving alien ships scattered in all directions, fleeing from weapons they could not understand or fight. But the Guardian network was not finished with them. All across Earth, the ancient structures were powering up to their full capacity. The blue glow that had lit Antarctica was spreading to every continent. Captain So-Young Choi received new orders to escort the fleeing alien ships to the edge of the solar system, but as her squadron approached the Void Reapers, something unexpected happened. The ancient beams reached out and touched each alien vessel, but instead of destroying them, the weapons seemed to be examining them. "What's happening?" So-Young asked over her radio. The answer came from Dr. Min-Soo Lee, his consciousness still linked to the Guardian network. "The system is learning. It's copying their technology, understanding how they work. The ancients want to make sure this can never happen again." As the Void Reapers fled, the Guardian network absorbed everything it could from their ships. Propulsion systems, weapons technology, communication methods, all of it was stored in vast databases buried beneath Earth's surface. The knowledge would be used to hunt down every other Void Reaper fleet in the galaxy. But that was not the most amazing discovery. As the ancient systems fully awakened, they began to reveal the true scope of Earth's inheritance. The planet was not just protected by weapons. It was the center of a network that stretched across the entire galaxy. Hidden installations on thousands of worlds were coming online, all of them responding to signals from Earth. The ancients had not just seeded the galaxy with life, they had created a defense network that could protect all of their children at once. Engineer Na Young Song was the first to understand what the energy readings meant. "It's not just Earth," she told Commander Dongwu Jiang. "The Guardian systems are active on every world where the ancients planted life. The entire galaxy is protected now." The Galactic Council, which had dismissed Earth as a primitive backwater, was receiving reports that defied belief. Ancient structures were emerging on hundreds of worlds, all of them broadcasting the same message in the same blue light. "The Guardians have awakened. The children are safe." General Kethmore of the Vexathari Empire stared at the reports in shock. His homeworld, which had weapons that could crack planets, was now protected by technology that made those weapons look like stone knives. The primitives he had mocked were the inheritors of the most advanced civilization in galactic history. Speaker Velnara of the Etherian Republic was already drafting messages of alliance and friendship to Earth. The humans she had pitied were now the most powerful species in the galaxy, and their protection extended to every world that harbored life. In the Antarctic complex, Dr. Min-Soo Lee slowly disconnected from the Guardian network. The immediate threat was over, but he could still feel the vast systems humming beneath the ice. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was the command center for the galaxy's defense. Dr. Hyjin Park was reading the final symbols that flowed across the walls. They spoke of responsibility and guardianship, of the duty that came with great power. Humanity had inherited more than just weapons. They had inherited the role of protectors for all life in the galaxy. 3 months after the Void Reapers fled Earth's solar system, Admiral Taeho Kim stood once again before the Galactic Council. But this time, no one was laughing. The chamber was silent as he walked to the center of the room, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The holographic display behind him showed Earth's new defenses. The ancient Guardian structures rose from every continent, their blue glow visible even from orbit. Orbital platforms, now equipped with Guardian technology, floated around the planet like jeweled rings. Most impressive of all were the ships, vessels that combined human engineering with ancient knowledge, creating designs that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Honored council members," Taeho began, his voice calm and steady. "I come before you today not to ask for help, but to offer it." General Kethmore of the Vexathari Empire shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His forearms were folded across his chest, and his red scales seemed to have lost their shine. The being who had once mocked humanity's primitive weapons was now looking at displays that showed technology beyond his understanding. Speaker Velnara of the Etherian Republic leaned forward in her chair. "Admiral Kim, our scientists have been studying the energy signatures from the Guardian structures. We cannot understand how they work. The power source appears to violate several fundamental laws of physics." Taeho smiled slightly. The ancients had a different understanding of physics than we do, but we are learning. That was an understatement. In the months since the Guardian Network had awakened, human science had advanced by centuries. Dr. Hyejin Park and her teams were working with alien knowledge that redefined everything they thought they knew about the universe. The ancients had not just built weapons, they had unlocked secrets of reality itself. They could manipulate space and time, convert matter to energy with perfect efficiency, and travel between stars without ships. All of this knowledge was now available to humanity, stored in vast databases beneath Earth's surface. But with knowledge came responsibility. The Guardian Network was not just a defense system, it was a test that continued every day. The ancient machines monitored human actions, making sure that their new power was used wisely. Commander Dongwu Jiang was overseeing the construction of the new Earth Defense Fleet. The ships being built in orbital yards around Earth were marvels of hybrid technology. Human creativity combined with ancient knowledge had produced vessels that were both beautiful and terrifying. "How many ships will we have operational by the end of the year?" he asked engineer Na Young-song. 50 of the new class cruisers and 12 of the heavy battleships, she replied, checking her tablet. "But Admiral Kim wants us to focus on exploration vessels too. The Guardian Network has identified several hundred worlds that need to be checked for other threats." The ancient databases contained records of other dangers in the galaxy. The Void Reapers had not been the only destructive force in the universe. There were beings of living energy that consumed stars, machine viruses that turned entire civilizations into their servants, and worse things that hid in the spaces between dimensions. Earth had inherited the job of watching for these threats and stopping them before they could destroy the galaxy's children. Captain So Young Choi was commanding one of the first exploration missions. Her ship, the EDS Guardian, was equipped with sensors that could detect ancient installations on distant worlds. Her job was to visit planets where the Guardian Network had detected dormant systems and help the local populations understand their new protection. "Captain," her science officer reported, "we're approaching the Kepler system. The Guardian Network shows 3 inhabited worlds, all with dormant installations." So Young nodded. This was becoming routine. Across the galaxy, ancient structures were awakening on every world where the ancients had planted life. Most of the local species had no idea what the structures were or why they had suddenly appeared. It was humanity's job to explain and to help. Earth's position as the command center for the Guardian Network made them the galaxy's new protectors, whether they had wanted the job or not. In Antarctica, Dr. Min-Soo Lee worked inside the main control chamber of the Guardian complex. The ancient systems had evolved since their first awakening, becoming more responsive to human thought and intention. He could now interface with the network without the overwhelming sensation of being connected to a vast, alien intelligence. "Su-Jin," he called to his assistant, "the network is detecting something unusual in the Andromeda galaxy. It looks like another Void Reaper fleet, but much larger than the one that attacked us." Su-Jin looked at the data flowing across the wall displays. "How much larger?" "Maybe 10,000 ships, and they're not moving randomly. They seem to be following a specific course toward our galaxy." This was the kind of threat the Guardian Network had been designed to handle. The ancient weapons could reach across intergalactic space if necessary, but such a large fleet would require more than just Earth's installations. The entire network would need to coordinate its response. Dr. Hyejin Park was deep in the ancient archives, learning about the original builders of the Guardian system. The more she discovered, the more amazed she became. The ancients had not just been advanced, they had been kind. Everything they had done was designed to protect and nurture life throughout the galaxy. They had seeded millions of worlds with the building blocks of evolution, then hidden Guardian systems to protect their children when they faced extinction. They had even programmed the network to teach and guide the species that inherited their technology, making sure that power would be used responsibly. They knew they were dying, she told Min-Soo during one of their research sessions. Some kind of cosmic event was going to wipe them out. So they spent their final years preparing for the future, making sure their children would survive. The ancient race had sacrificed themselves to save species that had not even evolved yet. They had built a legacy that would protect the galaxy, for millions of years asking nothing in return except that their inheritors use their gifts wisely. The Galactic Council was struggling to understand its new reality. Species that had considered themselves the most advanced in the galaxy were now looking to humans for protection and guidance. The power balance had shifted completely, and everyone was still figuring out what that meant. The humans have offered to share their knowledge, Speaker Velnara told the assembled council, but they want guarantees that it will be used for peaceful purposes only. This had been Admiral Tae-ho Kim's condition for cooperation. Humanity would help other species understand Guardian technology, but only if they agreed to use it for defense and exploration, never for conquest. The ancient network itself would monitor compliance. General Kethmore stood up to address the council. My people have been warriors for 1,000 years. We have conquered dozens of worlds through strength of arms. Now you ask us to give up our way of life? No, Tae-ho replied from his position at the center of the chamber. We ask you to find a better way of life. The ancients could have conquered the entire galaxy, but they chose to nurture it instead. They became something greater than conquerors. They became gardeners. The concept was difficult for many species to accept. The idea that true strength came from protecting rather than dominating was foreign to civilizations that had built their identities around military might. But the Guardian Network was patient. It had waited millions of years for its inheritors to be ready. It could wait a little longer for the galaxy to learn wisdom. Engineer Na Young Song was working on the most ambitious project yet, ships that could travel between galaxies. The ancient databases contained designs for vessels that could cross the void between star clusters, opening up possibilities that no one had ever imagined. The Andromeda Void Reapers won't reach our galaxy for 50 years, she told Commander Dongwu Jiang. But if we can build intergalactic ships, we can meet them halfway. Stop them before they become a threat to anyone. This was the future that humanity was building, not just defense of their own galaxy, but active protection of all life everywhere. The ancients had given them the tools to become something unprecedented, a species dedicated to nurturing and protecting the universe itself. Captain So Young Choi returned from her exploration mission with reports that filled everyone with hope. On world after world, she had found species that had been struggling to survive in a dangerous galaxy. Now they were protected by Guardian installations that had awakened at humanity's command. They're grateful, she told Admiral Tae-ho Kim. But more than that, they're inspired. They want to join us in the work of protection. They want to become gardeners too. The galaxy was changing. Species that had once competed for resources were now working together to explore and protect. The Guardian Network was teaching them all that cooperation was more powerful than conquest, that nurturing life was more rewarding than destroying it. Dr. Min-Soo Lee stood in the control chamber, watching data flow from across the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds were reporting successful integration with the Guardian Network. Thousands of species were learning to work together. The ancient dream of a peaceful, protected galaxy was finally becoming reality. But he also knew that this was just the beginning.